Well, thanks for showing up. I'm a big advocate of mixed human scale farming. I've watched the organic movement get co-opted, and seems like the regenerative agriculture movement likely will take that fate too. Okay, I came into farming as a teenager with annual crop production, vegetable growing, and I am a big fan of very small scale, very biologically intense market gardening, and in the way of the old French English ways of growing vegetables. And I guess I represent this sort of counterculture of glyphosate field grown vegetables, which questionably unsustainable, right? So I'm very much focused on no dig growing because having explored veg production around the world, I can't find a better way to treat microbes in an annual cultivation setting than no dig. Okay, I went to organic horticulture school, and the practices we were taught there hadn't evolved in decades. And I would make the case that vegetable production is, I don't know if it even belongs in regenerative agriculture because it's sustainable at best. I don't think annual crop cultivation is regenerative. I know there's a trend to call what you're doing regenerative gardening, but I could probably argue under the table there's nothing regenerative about it. But we eat vegetables, so we need to grow them. So I'm concentrating on how do we do that at human scale with optimal soil biology. We're microbe farmers. If we farm microbes and look after soil habitats, vegetables grow themselves. Okay? So I want to take you on a bit of a journey how we do that in a small scale. Market gardening's massively popular compared to other forms of farming, with new entrants to farming, the sort of bushy-tailed, bright-eyed entrepreneurial folk that I want to see running the food system when my kids are older. I don't want to have big industrial farms around towns. I want to have hundreds of little farms like mine in Sweden supplying the local food shed with intimate connection with their customers. That's the future I want for my kids. That's why I got into farming. Okay. But it's brought up a lot of things being here, thinking about what is regenerative. Okay. So we're in a very harsh climate for growing vegetables in Sweden. It's 3 months without frost. It can swing 20 days either way. Right? It's a very harsh place to grow vegetables for a living. But we make it work through biointense methods, the modern tools that any of you that are market gardeners will know about, and really good planning. Like any farm enterprise, this is about numbers and back-end planning with spreadsheets and intensive plantings and choosing crops very carefully to make the economy work. We drive a really good economy from this garden. Here in England, across to Germany, France, you can double the income that we can do because you've got more than double the growing season because of the shoulder seasons. So we'll try and extract the key pattern language of what makes it work. And I'm happy if anyone wants to interrupt with questions, just shout them out. Feel free to interrupt. I'll repeat them back on the microphone so everyone can hear. But feel free to interrupt because I'm sure some of you have heard me ramble on and want to get into specific details. There's a glimpse of our farm. We're a poultry producer. If anyone doesn't know our farm, it's very small. It's 13 hectares. It drives a very high level of economy in a very short season. And the three primary enterprises are a no-dig market garden and pastured layers and pastured meat chickens. We also produce pastured turkeys, heritage grass-fed beef, forest-raised pork, and we forage and sell things like wild mushrooms. I can walk out my front door in autumn, pick 50 kilos of mushrooms, sell them for 30 euros a kilo. Right? So we take use of the environment. But we're a farm that produces all of our food first and then sells certain things for profit. Right? That's a novel concept nowadays in farming, but we actually primarily feed ourselves. So we have a whole human diet on our farm, which is a privilege today, but it's also what we set out to do. This is what the farm looked like when we bought it. It was relatively very cheap compared to land here. Sweden's a very heavily regulated and taxed country. Everything's very expensive, but land is quite cheap. So this farm cost as much as a garage that you park a car in England. I didn't plan to move to Sweden, it kind of just happened, and I could buy a farm for cash, so I did. And I designed up a perennial system. That's what the future of agriculture for me looks like. Permanent grasslands, tree crops, etc. And they are things that don't necessarily cash flow a business. We set out a business plan to pay off our debts in 5 years and make city Stockholm salaries in the middle of nowhere in the countryside. Quite a tall order, but that's exactly what we did. So we made a plan. We did all of our work in the back end of spreadsheets, good decision making, highly ordered, structured processes around the farm. And it's very easy to look on social media today and see lovely market gardens and happy chickens, and that's all good, but that's the easy bit of farming. Like, what makes it work is back-end planning, numbers, rigorous planning, right? And that's what I specialize in, teaching young farmers coming into this to get their plans in order. So for me, regenerative agriculture must be soil building. It must be, you must be able to demonstrate that you are building topsoil. Using some of the methodologies, no, I'm not going to go into that, it's too controversial. But if you can't show you're building soil, you can't call what you're doing regenerative, full stop. It's probably not even sustainable. Farms that make money tend to be building topsoil. Farms that are losing topsoil basically only exist because of government subsidies, right? That's the way it is. Like, your soil is your bank account. So if you're not investing in it, then you're probably being propped up by interesting agriculture policies. And for me, regenerative agriculture must be managed holistically. We must believe that society and culture, economy and habitat and soil are equal importance in our decision making, because that's the only way that our vision can extend multi-generationally. England, same as every other country, where farmers typically 65, all of their money locked up in immovable infrastructure. They can't get out of farming, young people can't get into farming. That's a major problem. So I'm really interested in entrepreneurial approaches, and particularly the people coming into farming as first generation, because they've got much more malleable mindsets, right? So we're looking at low-cost startups that you can implement immediately and make profit in the first year, paying back your investments. That's with our market gardens, our poultry. Everything has got low, 20,000 euros startup and is making 100 grand plus in a year, right? So these are models that you don't learn at ag school, or I didn't. We're taught to make business plans that lose money for 10 years. That's crappy business, right? So these new models are not found in ag schools. They're found by pioneering people out in the field doing their thing. And so I've been on a worldwide journey looking at the best practices in different climates. And when you study ecology in different climates, it really informs your understanding of your own, and it helps break that conditioning of mindsets that's very entrenched in farming communities typically. So we'll skip through that, and just to say that I've been looking at how do we do financially viable market gardening, but at the same time not compromise our soil. And I can't find a better way to do that than this approach. So that's what I advocate. It's also very aesthetically pleasing. That's not a goal, but it's a very important part of our marketing. The first thing you see when you drive onto my farm is the cleanest, neatest market garden you've ever seen. And that translates to my beef is better quality than the neighbours. My eggs are the better quality than the neighbours. There's a level of care here that speaks to people. So you should not underestimate visual importance. We're a farm that invites our customers to bring their kids and watch poultry being slaughtered in a slaughter facility. There's not many farms that would do that, but that creates this inseparable bond with our customers that we would have to do something really silly to break that level of trust. We're farming customers. We're farming customers that will meet us halfway and meet us in a car park at 5:30 on a Thursday outside McDonald's and pick up all their products in the place that suits us at the time that suits us, right? So we've got our sales down. We're producing 5,000 meat birds, something like 8,000 eggs a week, 100 family vegetable box shares, and we're spending an hour in summer twice a week dropping off all of that produce. So we've got our sales extremely efficient. And that's really important because sales is half the work. Producing vegetables is easy. Selling it consistently without taking all your time is more challenging. But this approach I grew up looking and promoting people like Charles Dowding, and I've just adapted that approach with these level wood chip pathways as a way of mitigating the conditions I find myself in. This is neighbour's land. It's now my land, but we started out on the neighbour's land, and it had forestry machines. You know, in Sweden it's 90% monoculture spruce, and you have those big forest harvesters that have to cut a tree down every 40 seconds or they're not making money. And they're very heavy, big machines. And so this is heavy clay that's totally compacted. Not the best place to start a market garden. And every spring, a foot deep in standing water. So I developed this approach of raised compost beds with raised level wood chip pathways to soak up that excess moisture. Symptom-fighting farmer wants to drain the land to get rid of excess moisture to grow something that wants to die. Right? That's not a great starting point or foundation for production. I'm trying to build soil because it's carbon in soil that holds water and makes it work. Carbon is the secret ingredient. It's what drives the soil food web. It's what one particle of humus holds 4 particles of water. So now I'm suddenly at 20% organic matter. Do you think I have a water issue? I'm using a 20th of the water to irrigate than a traditional market gardener would because I don't till. My soil biology is intact and improving. I've created forest floor conditions that don't create the stimulus for weeds or earth repair mechanisms to germinate. So I'm using less water. I'm getting very vigorous plant health. I'm not suffering pests and diseases because healthy plants don't get attacked. Weak things get attacked because pathogens are nature's recycling system for turning things that aren't useful back into water-soluble nutrients for everything else. So if you have healthy crops, i.e. if you stop focusing on lettuces and kohlrabis and focus on microbes, you eliminate most plant pathogen problems. Right? Healthy plants are far less susceptible to disease. But this has some corollaries. So these level wood chip pathways allow us to eliminate nearly all washing of crops. There's no soil bouncing up. If I have a heavy rainstorm event, those pathways are sucking up a load of moisture and releasing it when it's dry, but there's no soil bouncing on my lettuce heads. 40% of a market gardener's job is post-harvest. Wash, pack, dry, sort. So if I eliminate the need for washing for most of my crops, that saves a huge amount of input hours. So that's been a happy byproduct. And it just eliminates weeding. This garden can be weeded in 6 hours a year, and it's tree seedlings that are coming in, not annual pioneers, because I've created a forest floor. So a lot of people come to No Dig and they think that this is about carpeting out weeds. So just for context, this is a pasture with buttercup, horsetail, nettle, all these tenacious perennial weeds. I have smothered them out, but I've also I'm gaming the system. I'm telling it, now you're a forest floor. And I'm not disturbing the soil. So the soil starts complexing towards the higher orders of forest floor complexity. We get proliferations of fungi in this market garden. You don't see fungi growing in ploughed fields or traditional tilled market gardens. Right? And that's a missing link in vegetable production because 95 or 96% of all plants on Earth have evolved in symbiotic relationship with fungi. Why? Because we had a few cataclysmic events in history that wiped out most of the life on Earth. And fungi don't need the sun to photosynthesize, do they? They eat dead things and they mine minerals from rocks, so they got selected for big time. So if you were a plant that had an association with the fungi, you got selected for big time. So now, millions of years later, nearly all plants have fungal hyphae growing up between the cell walls as nutrient pumps and water cycling agents. Just like you have 10 times more bacterial cells in your body than you have human cells. You're basically a sack of water carrying bacteria around from one place to another. But plants are the same, right? We as humans like to separate things and treat them as isolated units. Nature doesn't work like that, never has. Like fungi are really important to crop health, and that's part of why we've had rust spots on beet leaves. It's like, well, who cares about that? It's not even a problem. So by focusing on microbes, we eliminate work, we eliminate problems at the same time. And it happens to be very functional and beautiful, which is all part of marketing. So that's all nice and lovely. So how do we actually plan these things? We work with standardization. So I came into farming through organic vegetable production and horticulture. I left that very quickly, looking for interesting farmers around the world, and I went into meat production because I worked on big vegetable productions, worked super hard as a young man, and got paid like £4 or £5 an hour for basically producing a huge amount of value. And that sucked. So I went into like, okay, there must be more to farming. So I got into animal production and finding more profitable ways of farming and agroforestry, and I've worked in a lot of different settings. But I came full cycle. So when I designed this farm 10 years ago, there was never a plan to have a market garden. It was just going to be a kitchen garden because I knew there's much better ways to make money farming. But the advent of some of the new tools that have come out in the last 10 years make this type of work really fun and efficient again. Tools that can double your efficiency up to 20x your efficiency. Anything that doubles your efficiency is worth investing in if it works out economically on your spreadsheets. Anything that 20x is your time, you'd be crazy not to have, right? So these innovations in the last 10 years in the small scale, organic, properly regenerative vegetable production have made it very viable again. So you can make more money per land unit with this than any other farming enterprise, but it's very input intensive, right? But it suits a lot of our young, new farmers because you don't need much land, you don't need much money to invest, and you don't need much previous experience. There's nothing trying to kick you in the face and kill you. It's very easy to get into. The barrier to entry is very low. But what you'll see is the same pattern language going on with all the well-known market growers. We all use 75 centimeter wide beds. Why? Because A, it's ergonomic. I can straddle a bed for harvesting. I can step over beds, but I never have to hyperextend my back because market gardening is doing this 50,000 times. You know, if you do that for 40 years, you'll end up like a stereotypical bent over, you know, broken body. But it's also because Elliot Coleman over in America developed tools for 30-inch beds. Very, very efficient tools that we'll take a look at. So I don't have any friends left that have beds other than 75 centimeter beds. If you're not using this methodology, you're not going to be efficient, I can guarantee you, because all the best tools are built for this. And everything is standardized. So my beds are 10 meters long. Yours could be 20 meters long, 50 meters long. It doesn't matter, but they're all exactly the same, which means I'm eliminating all unnecessary complications. If I need to put a row cover on, like this cheap, efficient way to increase the microclimate on that bed, then I have 11 of these hoops. All those hoops are cut with 6mm agricultural wire at 1.5 meters length. And so when I go to collect the hoops, I just need 11 and that fits any bed. And if I want a row cover, it's 11 meters long to tuck the ends in. So every bit of infrastructure fits every single bed. Every time I want to fertilize a bed, it's the same amount. Every time I plant lettuce, it's the same number in the same pattern. So we take away all the complications of random beds of different sizes, and you have to find that one cover that only fits on that bed. You can't be doing that with market gardening. This is about rapid movement, rapid turnover of crops, producing a lot in a small space. And as I get older and my career goes along, I'm trying always to encourage people, like, how little can you do, how intensive can you make it? Because when you turn biology on, things happen that are breathtaking, like what's happened in my pastures at my farm. When you bring 7 species of animals at super high density, you start building topsoil at rates that agronomists still don't understand is possible, which P.A. Yeomans showed us 70 years ago, and agronomists were like, no, it takes 1,000 years to make a millimeter of soil. He's like, no, come on. They're like, no. But things happen with biologically intensity. There's a critical mass to these things. It's why I became a poultry farmer. My farm is too small to run larger animals, but I can have a lot of poultry. And when those ecosystem processes get going, radical soil transformation happens and health of ecosystem happens. Water cycling, nutricycling, everything is going exponentially towards the benefit of the whole. Right? So there is no sustainable. Nature doesn't do sustainable. Nature's moving in ever complexing, exponential life-giving growth, or the opposite. You know, So if you're damaging your system, it's getting worse every year, faster every year. And if you're putting the right pieces and then standing back and allowing nature to do its thing, it's going to exponentially benefit the system. So to take this complex job of growing vegetables, we need to standardize every single thing possible. And you see, everything is just regular and easy to manage, easy to calculate, plan, and then we can make a business plan. And then we can actually get paid for the work we do. We're working with very biologically intense spacings. We're looking at how do we armor the soil with compost as a mulch, and then how do we armor that with a rapid growing canopy as dense as possible without compromising that crop. So on a 75 centimeter bed, I can grow 12 rows of baby carrots with a special seeder that takes me about 40 seconds to seed. Those baby carrots are worth more than a full-grown storage carrot, because baby veg is all trendy now, isn't it? And then I can grow 6 rows of main crop carrots on a 75 centimeter bed. Well, if you go to the big arable farms in Sweden, we're 40 times more productive because we don't use machines that have fixed width sowing. We're humans that do things by hand. Right? So we can grow 40 times more vegetables per land unit. And that's easy to manage and keep the biology working intensively. And that translates to nutrient-dense food. We can measure that with bricks meters, and that's our marketing. We can show our vegetables are better than the things you can buy in the store. It translates to insect resistance, because healthy plants are much less susceptible to insect damage. Right, so the spacings I've put in my book and in videos and things, these are about as optimally intensive as you can go with vegetable planting. We grow about 40, 50 different vegetables. This is a bed of baby salad mix. Right? Everything is calculated on back-end spreadsheets. I get 30 kilos after 28 days on average, and 14 days later I get 12 kilos. That one bed in 42 days nets me 500 euros. I've got 200 of those beds. Right? It's very high intensity. It's a lot of food coming out of a very small space. And then the other thing we play with is all of this lovely wood chip. In Sweden it's all spruce. There are no other trees because it's all private owned monocultural vertical desert. So we can only get spruce wood chip. But I happen to actually like that. Like, better for the soil is to use mixed deciduous trees, and that is rotting down and becoming part of your future beds. But in Sweden you can't get that. And seeing the students of ours around the world, they have to replace that wood quite often. Because I've only got spruce, I only have to replace it every 5 years. I use 50 cubic meters every 5 years. It's very cheap in Sweden because it's forestry everywhere. So I did a lot of research on what edible mushrooms eat spruce. There's two. There's phoenix oyster and there's the winecap stropharia, king stropharia. This is a choice edible mushroom, 30 to 40 pounds a kilo. If I take my piles of wood chip and buy a few bags of inoculated mycelium grain, I can inoculate this whole pile, or I can sprinkle it on my paths that I'm just about to put new wood chips on. I can produce 8 tons of choice edible mushrooms just in my pathway, and mushrooms co-evolve with people. So what you find is, where do you find mushrooms growing in the wild? Well, the mycelial mushrooms will spread their spores on the tracks of animals. Right? So animals and fungi, we actually diverge from fungi much closer than when we diverge from plants. Right? But there's a special relationship there, and so the fungi don't pop up in the pathway, they pop up on the edge of the path next to the bed, because we're walking in the middle of the path, so it gets quite compacted. We also don't get slug and snail problems because they don't like compost and they don't like compacted wood chip. So we have no slug and snail problems at all. Sweden is plagued by the murder slug, the Spanish slug. We have 0 at our farm. We're not making a habitat for them, keeping our compost well away. We're thinking biologically. But these mushrooms, they're only popping up for like 4 days. So even if they come up in the beds, they're not in the way of crops or anything like that. So that's a nice idea you can explore. That's a lot of high quality protein and a lot of value that is just turning that wood chip back into soil that's going to be part of the garden in the future. I think fungi is a big missing link in these kind of systems. And it's because in our tillage-based agriculture, the first thing you kill in soil is fungi. Like, it needs moisture, it needs carbon, it doesn't like tillage. So if you have a tilled soil situation, you won't have much fungal hyphae at all. This is how we irrigate. So you need about 40 litres per metre square for average optimal cropping. Now, anyone that's got a home garden, you know, you can plant zucchini or courgette and it will grow and you'll get courgettes. But if you've seen properly irrigated crops, you know, you might get 6 courgettes, I might get 40 off the same plant in the same time. Irrigation is key, and on average across our standard market garden crops, you need to allow 40 litres per square metre, and then you've got to plan for that driest, droughty thing that can happen each summer, which is getting a bit unpredictable, isn't it? But you need to know you can deliver that water. So we have a little borehole. Everyone in Sweden has their own drilled wells, and that's nowhere near sufficient to irrigate a market garden. So we had to build a dam. I mentioned this yesterday, but this is a really nice product that I would like to highlight. So this is stream fed. We have 2 streams running through the farm, and this is using geosynthetic clay liner, GCL, geosynthetic clay liner. It's bentonite clay sandwiched between geosynthetic textiles, and it's needle punched together, and that sort of sucks a bit of the felt through to the bottom layer, and that means the clay is now sandwiched in this roll of material. They come in standard rolls of 5 by 40 meters, £5 a square meter, which is no more expensive than high quality butyl pond liner. But the beauty of this stuff is it has infinite lifespan because it's clay. Bentonite clay is very special. It's sought out in nature by elephants, baboons, macaws. They'll travel hundreds of kilometers to go get it. Any of you that have done a lot of fasting, maybe you've eaten bentonite clay. It rips heavy metals out your body. It's a very absorptive material. It's used in medical applications. But what happens in this material is it swells 8 times its thickness when it gets wet. So it's basically a mobile clay slip that lines ponds. They use it for motorway sidings, sewage containment. It leaks less than plastic. Like, it basically doesn't leak and it lasts forever. And the beauty of it is you can stick an iron bar through that and it will seal up around it. You can grow a tree through it and it will seal up around it. Amazing stuff. And it works. You see here, I've got an inflow from the stream and an outflow that's bigger so that I'm flood proof. And where I've put that overflow pipe, I've just cut across with a sharp knife, stick the pipe through, add a bit of bentonite powder around, and stick another square on top, and that's sealed. Super easy to work with, and the beauty of it is it works. Here you can see I'm overlapping 2 rolls, and you just put a bead of the powder in between, it seals up. Okay, and it works by the weight of the topsoil going back on top, compressing that, so when the clay expands it's under pressure and it gets in all the gaps and seals up. The beauty of that is I can come along with submarginal and aquatic species, plant it up, and 6 weeks later it's a maturing ecosystem with ducks. It's full of brown trout, and that's now putting fertility and a lot of oxygen from the moving water. It's about 250,000 litres and it refills every 30 hours. So I've got living, healthy water to irrigate my crops, right? And it means I'm resilient in long droughts, which is important.
Sorry. Can you just repeat the name of the product?
Yes, I think it's marketed in the UK as Bentamat.
Bentamat.
Is the trade name, but it's GCL, or geosynthetic clay liner, or it could be bentonite clay liner. You can find it in every country in the world now.
Okay.
Very nice material. It's not good for, like, it's good for ponds and dams, the batter. So there's technical shear loads that you can have on it. So 2 to 1 would be the steepest incline to keep the topsoil in place. So if you want to do like planning around that, you have to take that into account. You need quite a big surface area to get depth because of that batter slope on the walls. But anyone that supplies it will be able to give you the geoengineering capacities of it. But I love it. It's amazing stuff. It's very heavy. A roll of that is like 1.5 tons. So it's a bit it's quite a lot to handle, but I've used it in different parts of the world, and it's incredible material. Like, yeah. And then we just pump from there up to the market gardens, and we just use impact heads. So market gardeners, you've got basically drip line, wobblers, and impact heads. I use impact heads because I've got quite a high head pressure I have to pump, so I need to get rid of that water quick. Wobblers work well for low pressure systems, and a wobbler is just like lots of little sticks popping up off a main line with a little head that waters a few beds each side. So this is just watering like 20 meters each side, but you have to design that system in. I've met a lot of market gardeners starting up who haven't put their irrigation system in first, and that's a really bad idea. You put your water system in before you plant things. And so you can get help. If you go to a company that supplies irrigation gear, they can help you with the tessellation of the water pattern so that you can really dial that in. It's so critical. Like, water is absolutely directly proportional to yield. Plants are 75% water, just like you. So it's all about optimal watering conditions. So we actually have a rain gauge, the weather forecast, and we know how much water we put down an hour. So we're always looking at what's happened, what we're expecting to happen, and making decisions to optimize water. And then certain crops need extra water, like squash, for example, things like that. So watering is key and shouldn't be overlooked. So what do we grow? Well, profitability is a factor of how long something takes to grow, how much space it takes up, how much or how you yield it. You have single harvest crops, you have 2 harvest crops, and you have multi-harvest crops, right? And so I need to know what a bed is worth, right? Like, is it worth growing? You need some metrics for decision making. For example, I haven't grown potato because I can't compete with a field scale potato grower in this system. It doesn't make sense. It's so low value. It's way better for me to buy the neighbor's potatoes, tell my customers these are potatoes from John next door, because it doesn't meet my standards. This garden has to produce a certain amount of money to justify an employee. So I can't grow something that doesn't make money. And potatoes are one of those things. But you've got to balance this because there's always culturally important things. Sweden, you've got to have new potatoes for midsummer because everyone eats rotten fish and new potatoes, so you've got to have it. And that's, you know, every country's got their little things that you need to supply even if they're not profitable. But every time I go to a market garden and they're not doing so good, I'll always analyze these 2 things first: what crops they grow, what percentage of high to low value, and their crop spacings, right? Because you can often, like, a common problem I've seen in farms all over the world is people say, okay, we're having a kid now, or we need to rent a bigger house, we've got a mortgage, we need to earn more money, let's do more of this. And that's usually always the wrong answer. It's like, how do you do more by doing on less land? That's always the right answer. And if you follow my YouTube, there's some really nice examples of that where I've consulted to farms. And it's quite nice being a consulting position because you can say things that no one else is allowed to say. Wife or husband can't say that, but I can come in and just say something really difficult because they're projecting that onto me, right? So there's been times when I've like told people to basically radically change all this hard work they've been doing, and it be very successful on cutting down, getting smaller and more intensive, and making much more money doing that. And I'm just pointing that out because that's a pattern I've seen all over the world. People tend to want to spread themselves out to make more money, and it means they dilute themselves and they can't manage it anymore. Like, how small can you go? How little can you do? That's the right answer usually. So we need to like decide what we need to grow, and there's going to be cultural things we have to grow. But this is a list that's true for me in Sweden, and it might look a bit different, but it's going to be basically this pattern here. Tomato for me is a very low value crop because I have such a short season. You have more than double a season here, so tomato is a high value crop here. But for me, it's quite a low value crop. I can grow 4 times more revenue in salad underneath the tomato crop than I can grow in tomatoes. But that's just because I don't want to heat a tunnel with fossil fuel, because that just seems stupid, you know. And then I'm competing with the big industrial glass houses, and I can't compete. So I'm going for high value crops, but not only high value crops, But if a vegetable grower is making money, it's because they've got the right proportion of high value crops to low value crops. And nearly every time I've seen market gardeners not thriving, it's because they're growing too big a proportion of low value crops, right? So that's worth to consider. And data collection, like everyone should have a notebook or an app on their phone that they're recording time, money, sizes, notes. You can't make effective decisions unless you've got that data in your head, you know. So it's really important. And I've done that for my, I'm educating people, so I have to have that data. But everyone needs that data because you don't get lost in decision making if you have all the data at your fingertips. It's very obvious what the right decisions are because you're not questioning yourself. You've got a data-driven approach. So everything's very standardized. All the beds have labels. That's important because we've got to make a crop plan. We've got to have labels on seed trays so that we know what goes where, and we need to communicate with each other. So everything's got to be labeled. It could be Northfield 1 to 10. We have basically blocks of 10 beds that all have a name and number so that we can communicate about when things are harvested, when things are seeded, etc. Then we have standardized seeding rates for different types of tools we use, or standardized spacings for transplanting. And what we're trying to do is get to, like, all of our crop planning is happening in the winter time, and what we're trying to get to, we actually originally started this as a box scheme. So we wanted to look at when is the earliest we can risk saying that we have a box for sale, and when's the latest that we can risk, and looking at what's possible based on our season. What types of crops can we have every week through the season? And then we have to develop what is a vegetable share. Well, every week you need some salad. Every week you need some cooking greens. Every week people like fresh carrots. You need some like root veg and maybe some weird thing. And you've got to decide what that share is. Nowadays we haven't been selling as veg boxes, but that is how we planned this whole garden. So you decide what that share is, and then there's all these amazing online calculators now where you can type in your last and first frost, and it will tell you when is the earliest and latest you can sow any type of crop. So now you can build a sort of sheet of what you're able to have throughout the year, and then you've got to work backwards and forwards to make a crop plan to maximize. It's kind of like playing Tetris. I want all my beds to be full of crops and living roots in the soil as long as possible throughout the year. So I'm just playing Tetris with the different lengths of time the crops are in the ground. So one very contextual important point is you need to have the days to maturity of any of the things you're trying to grow. And most seed suppliers cannot give you that. But if you don't know how long something takes to grow, you cannot keep your bed full optimally through the year. And that means you need loads more bed space because you don't know when those carrots are done, and that means you're spreading yourself thin, and your market garden won't look clean like mine. So carrots are not just carrots. Fast carrots are 52 days. Slow carrots might be 86 days. They're very different things, aren't they? So days to maturity, what is that? It is the average of how long that crop takes to grow to harvest, averaged across the whole season, right? So a big seed company will be able to plant them every week through the year and tell you the average across the year. But we know if this radish takes 41 days, if I plant that first thing in the spring when it's cold, it's going to take longer, isn't it? Likewise, at the other end of the shoulder season, it's going to take longer. So you have to create a formula for the shoulder seasons. In the middle of summer, it's easy to have too much vegetables, isn't it? It's very hard to have enough vegetables at the start and end. So all the planning goes to the first few shares or markets or boxes, and the middle bit you don't need to plan so much. You just need to plan not to give people unreasonable amounts of things, like who the hell eats 4 courgettes a week anyway? You know, a lot of the early veg box schemes shot themselves in the foot in this country by just giving people inappropriate food that you don't eat, you know. So it's all everything we do on our farm is highly ordered and mathematically driven. The actual day-to-day bit is just doing fun stuff, but the thought behind it is very intricate, okay? And I lost my thread there. Yes, days to maturity. So what I do is I have a rule. So my last frost date is 8th of June. My first frost date is middle of September, right? It's pretty harsh for growing vegetables. So what I do is if I'm seeding up until 20th of April, I'll add 14 days to that days to maturity. And if I'm seeding from then till the 5th of May, I'll add 7 days. So that's not precise, but I'm adding this buffer that I know it's going to take longer in the shoulder seasons. Now, the reason that days to maturity is important is because I want the smallest garden possible with always having a crop. As soon as one crop's harvested, there's a new crop in there this afternoon, right? I need that level of biology. That's what drives the soil food web, which keeps plants healthy and minimizes labor too. So that's led to having to buy seeds from certain places because small heritage seed companies, they can't tell you days to maturity. But if you can't sell me a seed with the days to maturity, I can't make a business plan. You know, the only reason this works is the high order of organization behind it. And that's the same with any business. So then you have to buy seeds further afield. And what most growers maybe don't understand is that the seed industry is a global industry. You know, like some of your organic seed suppliers are buying Syngenta, Monsanto seeds and selling them, and it's an NDA that you don't know, they don't know, or whatever. So that's a contentious issue, but you need days to maturity if you want to make really profitable market gardens. All the best growers you see are doing that because you can't. It's same with the meat chicken. I need to know this chicken will weigh this much on this day if I feed it like this, because I can't run a business otherwise, right? But what we're doing with this planning is we're trying to get to a point. So come October, when we stop sales in Sweden at the end of October, I've made my plan for the next year. I've ordered all my seeds before everyone else has, so that all the things I've planned with their days to maturity are still in stock. Because if you leave your planning till the next season, all those lovely varieties you planned around are bought out because everyone else wanted them, and now you've got to replan with all the different days to maturity of whatever you can get hold of. So we want to order our seeds in October, turn brain off. I don't need to think about market garden until March next year. So I can just go surfing or whatever. I don't even surf, but so I'm making this bed plan. I've played Tetris, filled it as much as I can throughout the year, and now I've created a calendar. And this is the end point. This is what drives our market garden. This has got simple, it's a yearly calendar that says transplant, it says direct seed, it says seed into like seed trays, it says harvest, or it says prep the bed. And every action of my whole plan for the whole year is now in a calendar that I don't need to think. I wake up in March and it says, oh, you need to seed 20 trays of spring onion. Okay, I'll do that. And I don't have to think about my garden at all in the busy growing season. I just follow the plan, right? And that's really nice because it's quite hard managing a market garden, but we've taken all the complexity out by standardizing everything. And then we've done all the thinking about it, and now we just have to execute. Of course, there's on-the-ground decisions that need to be made, but this is one of these things where, this broccoli looks really good, but it's 2 weeks late. We should just keep the broccoli, but no, you should rip that broccoli out. And it's hard to do because you've got attached to your nice broccoli, but that crop that needs to fit afterwards is in your shoulder season when it's hard to guarantee you've got the supply, right? So you tend to stick to the plan because the plan already knows. You did all that thinking already, right? So it's a very nice way to run. So there's one of these stuck in my nursery, and that runs the garden. Anyone can come in and know what to do that day. And that's how we run our whole farm, because the market garden job is a full-time job, but the pastured poultry is a half-time job to do all the poultry except for slaughter day. So everyone's involved in slaughter day, and then it's a very part-time to run them all the rest of the time. So sometimes someone has to go and do something that's not their main thing. So I want a system where anyone can look at that and say, I know how to do that. Right? And then everything's got a layer of resilience. So what we did, because it's minus 30 odd when we're starting our seeds, we have to use lights and we need a heated space, and we want to do low input stuff. So we have a wood stove burning 24/7 for 7 months of the year, and the hottest room of the house is on the south side here. So we went to the Stockholm police station and they said, you can have all these bulletproof windows if you take them down. So we built like a bunker as a greenhouse that's the safest place in the farm. And it's sunken into the ground so it doesn't freeze. It's not like it warms it up, but if you dig down 8 foot anywhere on Earth, it's the same temperature all year round, right? So we're using that principle to minimize the amount of heat needed to keep this space at optimal temperatures. Nurseries, on average, you want 18 degrees, right? And so that's pretty easy to achieve with heat from the wood stove and then a little bit of supplemental electricity too. So because we need lights and heat, I opted for vertical stacking because that's the smallest space that I need to heat then. But if I was here in England, I wouldn't do it like this. I would have just a tunnel with heated sand benches. You can buy heat cables that you run through sand and put your plants there. It's much nicer to have all your seedlings in one flat plane, easier for observation and for watering. I just didn't want to heat a massive tunnel in Sweden in winter. That's just crazy. Right? So I've done it like this, but you shouldn't. And you see we have to create quite a lot of light pollution. So we use which one is it, T8 or T5? The thin fluorescent bulbs? T5. They're still way better than LEDs. LEDs are not good enough. Maybe for microgreens, but for my seed starts, I get a lot better quality plants with T5s. We actually got the manager of a type of shop in Sweden. They didn't have enough for us, so he was having a national meeting with all his people, and we just wholesale bought every light fitting they had. So I've actually got enough for the rest of my life, I think. So you can see everything's on racks, but this is all tessellating too. So we grow in paper pot trays, which I'll mention later. We grow in these rigid, high-quality plastic trays that don't bend and break. There's so much plastic used in market gardening. I mean, we're living in a visual world of social media, but vegetable growing is the most dirty of all the farming industries. There's so much plastic hidden away out of sight that you don't see on Instagram, you know. So we're trying to use high quality plastics to minimize that. So we invest in good quality trays, and they're all built so that they tessellate on those racks so that we're maximizing the use of this space. If I laid this space, this is 3.5 by 7.5 meters. If I laid it out on one horizontal plane, it would fill this tent, right? Which you can imagine is not an easy space to heat in -30. And so you see, these are these rigid trays. They're very good quality. You can buy many types nowadays. You have good suppliers here for solid plastic trays. And we use a simple dibbler. And this is how we do nearly everything possible we hand transplant, because I can have a 4-week-old plant going in the day that I've harvested another crop. So it's a way of stacking in time. If I had space, I would even pot on and grow half-grown lettuces, because then I could get 2 or 3 more rotations in a single year. Yeah. So always trying to stack up in space, not in getting bigger areas. It's way more efficient. So good quality trays, that's not so important. We also use the Japanese paper pot tool. So this is an incredibly well-designed tool. The European and American versions are not as good. Like, this is the original Japanese one, and it's just perfect as it is. People are trying to reinvent the wheel sometimes to not have to import things from Japan, but this tool, I've tried all of them, and it's the best one, I think. So this works with a special seeder. It's a drop seeder. So I have an acrylic tray with 256 holes in it, with a little sheet of perspex on top that has 256 holes in it. So I put 10,000 leek seeds in there. I swish it around, and there's now 256 leek seeds in the hole, and it lines up perfectly with these trays they have. So you can fill the tray, pop, drop down 256 seeds. It basically means I can precision sow. I plant like multi-sown things like 4 spring onions per cell. So I can put 1,000 precisely sown spring onion seeds. It takes me about 1 minute 30 to fill that tray, seed it. I might have 50 trays to do that day. So it's a massive time saver just in the seeding. But then this transplanter, it's paper chains like a honeycomb held together with paper at different spacings. So what this does is basically like transplanting sprouted seedlings, but I walk along and I can precision sow at walking speed. Right? So massive time savings in the seeding and in the transplanting, but it's a little bit finicky because you're planting sprouted seedlings, not transplants. So they need to be kept moist. They need a little bit more care. But this can radically transform the time inputs. You know, this is a 10x tool.
What's the minimum size of enterprise to actually implement those tools? Because they're quite expensive.
This is so I like to do military prioritization of like must, should, could. This is a could. All the others are musts and shoulds.
Right.
This tool is a could. This setup with the cedar trays, it costs you as much as all the other market garden tools you need. So if you're doing like 1,500 square meters of beds or more, then it's probably going to save you money and time. Thing is, most farmers aren't very good at valuing their time. So it's hard to get into thinking of time versus money because they don't value their time anyway. So, yeah, it's a mathematic thing. But I would say this is the least important of the tools I'll show you. But it's very cool. This is maybe a video. I don't know if that doesn't work. This one doesn't work. Well, you can see it online. But this is the paper chains. You open them up, stick them on the frame, fill it with compost, and seed it. Off you go. That's the drop seeder. And you can get drop seeders. A friend of mine is making innovative tools for European people, and he can make you a drop seeder for whatever size tray you've got. It's a very simple thing, but imagine putting individual seeds into thousands of cells. This is moving trays every minute. It's a really efficient, simple way to do. Here you can see multi-sown spring onions, which is what this tool was originally designed for. And we're actually growing to harvest. I'm growing, if I need 50 bunches of spring onion, I'll put 50 bands on my fingers. I'll put some in my back pocket for spares. And then I'm walking along and I'm picking a whole bunch in one movement and banding it as I go. We're minimizing movements. It might sound over the top for some of you, but if I'm cutting 50,000 lettuces a year, I want a knife that goes like that and does a push cut, not this, because this is arthritis in 20 years compared to like still rock climbing or whatever it is, right? So we're growing things. There's a lot of thought behind these things. The day-to-day is very simple, but the thought is what makes it efficient and ergonomic. This is a guy in England who, I think they sell these through Blackberry Lane. This is a broad fork. So we use this like a keyline plow in our pasture. This is for deep soil decompaction without turning subsoil on top of topsoil, i.e. now it's dead soil, right? And I've tried all the ones available on the market, and this is the best tine angle for ergonomics. So what we do is every 20 centimeters on the bed, we'll kick this into the ground, and I lean back a little bit like this. The ones that aren't so good, you have to lean all the way down to the ground to get the same effect. So that tine angle is really important. It's kind of what makes a keyline plow work. The explosive power and the minimal edge touching the soil of a keyline plow is far superior than like the McConnell Shakerator or some of the implements I've seen here. It's just a Rolls-Royce version. So this guy is a blacksmith down in the south of England, makes the best ones I've seen anywhere on the planet. So this is a must, and it's a 3-year tool if you're working with no-dig systems. Like Charles has always given me grief because he's like purist and he's like, this is tillage. And it's like, well, no, this is different. Tillage for me is destroying soil structure and turning subsoil on top of topsoil. That's not good for soil. You could not make the case for that, right? This is not turning soil at all. It's not splitting the soil surface. It's decompacting under the ground to allow plants to root better, to release sugar, to allow air and moisture movement in the soil. And after 3 years, we didn't need it because I can just put it on the ground and it doesn't do anything anymore. And everyone of the people I've trained that's been doing that has found the same. 3 or 4 years in, that doesn't create any benefit to the soil. But this is a mechanical kickstart that if you're starting on crappy clay pasture like this, it's going to accelerate that process, just like my keyline plow accelerated the rapid transformation of my pastures, even though it was the animals doing the real work, right? So he doesn't really have a firm, but he sells through Blackberry Lane. No, but they've stopped. So Reag Tools, you can find them. They sell all kinds of market garden tools and things. So this is just to illustrate that. This is a handheld version of a keyline plow. I would use it for isolated tree plantings and things like that. Forests grow on dead forests, so we want decompacted land. Yeah. Then using the right size tools. I said about 75 centimeters. So if you have a normal garden rake to level your bed, and the reason we need to level a bed is that the seeders work better and the harvester works better, because sharp blades should never touch soil, because that's how you sharpen, that's how you dull a blade very quickly. So level beds are quite important actually. But if you take a normal rake, because you don't want to spend 80 euros on the right size rake, you have to go twice. I just go once. That means you stop, I stop at lunchtime, you stop at dinner time, right? Little things. You're doing them a lot of times a year. Those 200 beds I've got, I'm flipping them 2 or 3 times, right? So it's a lot of using rakes. So get the right size rake. That's a must. This is a bed roller. This is a Could. This basically puts a little bit of surface compaction back on the very nice textured bed, a bit like on a grain drill where you're tucking seeds to sleep with the press wheels behind the grain. This is a bit the same. It just puts a little bit of surface compaction that gets it. You get much better accuracy with your seeding machines. They just drop seed more consistently because you've got that little bit of surface compaction. And this one marks rows as well. So you can mark rows that make it easy to put crops down at the right spacings. So we use that sometimes. And this is a lovely tool from Johnny's in America. This is a 6-row seeder. And it's half the width of a 75 centimeter bed. So I can do 6 rows per bed by doing every alternate hopper, or I can do 12 rows per bed. So if I want to plant mesclun, which is that 500 euro net 42 day per bed crop, that's the tool I use. I can fill it with a certain amount of grams of seed per hopper. I walk up, I walk back down, and I've got precision sown 12 rows of crops. Or I can use it for 6 rows of crops. Very nice tool. It's about 500 euros. If you're growing baby salads, then it's a must. I use it for carrots, and we all hack these tools. So it's got all kinds of settings for different size seeds and different band configurations for spacing. But because we do this all day, every day, we just hack the tool, and we have basically the same setting for every crop, which averages it's better for us than having to fiddle with the machine each time. So we find one setting, and the only change is one band jumps down for carrots. Otherwise, they're all the same. And so there's a lot of this being shared online where people find these little hacks to just optimize efficiency. Then we use Jang seeder. This is, if you want to buy a direct seeder, this is the most versatile. It works in worse soil conditions. It's about 400 euros, and it's just incredibly precise at dropping a seed at every interval that you want it to. So you need 5 different rollers, and that does for all the crops you want to grow. And it's a very effective tool. This is the greens cut harvester from Farmers Friends in America. This is a 20x tool. Right? All of these battery-powered tools have changed the game. These are the things that made me want to grow vegetables again. Right? This is a serrated razor blade, half the width of the bed, with a brush that sweeps baby leaves into the bag. So to cut a bed of mesclun could take 25 minutes. That's not bad, because it's 500 euros net there, right? But this thing makes it a 45-second job, and it cuts it much cleaner, which means your regrowth is even better. Right? Because to get a regrowth off this high-value crop, you can't have old leaves lying around that then you've got to sort through manually. You know, you need, if you're supplying chefs and restaurants, it's got to be primo quality. So that's a must-have. This is, this is a crop that you can sell for, with a mixed baby leaf like this, I can sell for 20 euros a kilo wholesale. Right, then I'm netting about 600-700 euros per 10-meter long bed, right, in 42 days. So this is the most profitable thing we can grow. We also use it for microgreens. Microgreens are the most profitable thing you can do per land unit, but you need a big population to support this. So my little lean-to greenhouse where I start my vegetables, I could produce about 75,000-80,000 pounds worth of microgreens just in that space, but I live in the middle of nowhere. So it only works at scale if you live outside a bigger city where you can supply all those chefs that put a little bit of this on every plate just to look fancy or whatever, but that's a great complementary enterprise, because in the winter we only have storage crops. So this is like super nutrient dense fresh things that people pay. I think I sell these privately to to our customers for the average of, we grow the simple ones like pea, sunflower, mustard. We sell those privately for something like 65 euros a kilo privately. And people love it because there's nothing fresh in Sweden because it's winter for 6 months. But very effective tools. Like these are the tools that make vegetable growing fun again. This may be a bit of a clunky video. So these are all must have. If you're growing baby salads and things, these are tools you must have. Simple harvesting tools, like we use serrated knives for most things, and push cut knives as well. This ergonomic thing. It's like the tools you need for human scale market gardening are very few, you know. 2,000-3,000 euros and you've got all the tools you actually need. These are Japanese fingerless scissors that mean that when you're working in hoop houses with tomatoes, cucumbers, where your weekly job is taking off suckers and trellising plants, you don't have to put your hands in your pocket to take out scissors in between this motion, right? Cutting down is all these little time and motion things that add up to, I work a normal work week and you're working too late at night. I get a holiday and go abroad, you don't. I drink gin and tonic in the evening, you carry on working, you know? Little things. Everything's standardized. There's always 11 hoops for every bed. All of our tools are stored in the middle of the market garden because we don't want market garden people coming into our workshop where we do engineering projects, because market gardeners are always messy and dirty. So keep the tools where you need them. Minimize movement. Our wash pack station makes up 40% of the work of the garden, so you put it in the middle of the garden, you know. Everything's just about simple plan designed to minimize the amount of times. Like farming could be described as walking from A to B, trying to remember to take something with you every time. That's like basically what we do all day. So by putting things in the right location to each other, we minimize those things. Wash and pack station's super important. So this is, it depends how you sell, but it makes up a large proportion of, you know, most of the season once the main plantings are out. Of course, beds are being flipped all the time, but harvesting, storing is an art and a skill. Like microgreens, premium microgreens will last 2 weeks in the fridge in perfect condition. But if you don't treat them properly, they might last 4 days in the fridge and then turn into anaerobic smush in your customer's fridge. If that's the restaurant and the chef, they're not coming back. And you just lost someone that can take large volumes potentially. So you've got to know what you don't know. So you should be testing that for yourself, because I told you I wanted my clean vegetable garden so I don't need to wash crops. If I don't wash my lettuce and I put it in the right storage conditions, and you washed your lettuce and even dried it properly and put it in, mine will outlast yours in the fridge. And you maybe didn't dry it properly, so yours might last a third of the time mine does, but you don't get that feedback from your customers, you just lose your customers, right? Like customers aren't telling you that usually. So in the market garden world, I guess like 75% retention rate with box schemes is considered very good, right? If 75% of people come back, you're doing really well. I haven't been selling in boxes for years, but it's just interesting to think of that. You need to know what you're passing on to your customers, and you need to know what you don't know. But it can be done very low cost. So we have a simple wash pack station that you'll see, and then this is what we use for refrigeration. So we have a 20 cubic meter chiller, and this is a AC unit that we're tricking to become an air conditioner. It's an air conditioner that we're tricking to become a chiller, because it's €1,000 just to get the gas technician out in Sweden. It's another couple of thousand to get him to connect up the compressor, right? And then it's quite a lot of energy to power a chiller, and we need this chiller running all the time in summer. So it's an expensive endeavor. This CoolBot, the little black thing, costs a couple of, well, £300 probably, and that just plugs into an air conditioner unit and tells it you're a refrigerator now. And now it goes down, because all AC units are stuck to 18 degrees, but this makes an AC unit go down to 4 or 5 degrees. And that's an ideal temperature for storing vegetables. So now our build cost, if I bought a 20 cubic meter chiller in Sweden, it would be about £20,000. I built this for about £1,500, and it cost me about a fifth of the energy to run it.
What does it cost, the unit?
CoolBot is the hardware and software that tricks the thing. But there are two things. This is a American AC unit where they have these through window ones. So you don't need any specialist installation. You just cut a hole and stick it in. I use one of them for my egg packery because eggs must be kept between 8 and 16 degrees. And it gets a little bit too hot in the middle of summer. And then for this type of through window AC unit is only good up to 9 or 10 cubic meters. And there is one unit available in Europe that's good for up to 20 cubic meters, and it's really cool because it's got an external compressor, but it's got pre-filled gas pipes, so you can fit it yourself without that expensive gas technician. There's only one in Europe that does that. That's about 1,500 euros, and I can't remember the name. It's all these weird Bosch Do 169246, but I can maybe find a link to it and post it somewhere. So there's two models that are worth having. It's all about BTUs, the size of the room, how thick the insulation is, and the temperature you want to go to. But these have been used like in mortuaries, wine cellars, dairies, flower growers, veg growers. They're really a good way to go. We're trying to, like, season extension, something you should think a lot about here in terms of making microclimates in microclimates. There's no point me extending my season very much in Sweden because it's light is the limiting factor. It gets so dark, nothing could grow, and you can't even overwinter anything. So, but tunnels inside tunnels, like putting fleece tunnels inside a tunnel jumps you a whole climate zone. Well, that's quite significant if you're a vegetable grower. That's giving you like weeks either end of your season. So, simple means it doesn't need to cost a lot. These are the caterpillar tunnels that I designed because people were trying to ship caterpillar tunnels over from America. Shipping steel pipe and plastic from America here makes no sense. So I worked with a UK company to get them to make them. They didn't want to take this on because they have an established brand and they didn't want the risk of something they don't really know about. So I said, well, can we sell them for you? So my friend Jake at Oxton Organics is selling these in England. And the beauty of these is they're much lower cost than static houses, and they're very quick to move. Like a 40-meter caterpillar tunnel, if you farm the same way I do, it covers 16 beds. I can put that up with one competent person in less than 2 hours, and I can take it down and move it very easily. So it can follow a crop rotation and be used in different ways than a fixed tunnel. So lower cost and movable, flexible. And they're very simple. It's just using string to hold down that plastic. And they need a bit of regulation, like for ventilation and things, but it's like a step up from using row covers to having a fixed grow house. Fleece covers are the most cost-effective way to influence your microclimate. So a fleece is, you get 20 grams, 40 grams. Probably in England, I would take a 20 and a 40 gram. In Sweden, I just take 40 gram because we don't have spring and autumn. We just have winter and then a couple of weeks of summer. So I just go for heavyweight. Like all my crops are under 40 gram fleece in the very beginning and end of the year. Here you might go for 20 and 40. And I also use them, see them lying on the ground flat there. Compost is dark and it dries very quickly in hot weather, right? So things like carrots, you need to keep them super moist for good germination. So that's what I'm doing there. Any direct seeded crops that are very water sensitive, I'm putting that fleece directly on the bed, and that's holding the water surprisingly well. Right? But inside those hoops, that's giving you like 4 or 5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. So it's quite significant. It's a disposable product. It lasts 4 or 5 years maybe, but it's not lasting forever. But it's by far the cheapest way to extend your season. And this is the extent of my insect protection. It's just insect net small enough for flea beetle. We have major problems with cabbage butterflies and flea beetle, basically. So we just use physical barriers for that. And that works in the same way. So same size as the row covers. But that's basically the extent of our pest and disease management. Right? And part of that is because I'm so far north in Sweden, I have such a harsh winter that I probably have less pest pressure. Like tomato blight I don't get tomato blight because there's no one within 100 miles of me growing tomatoes. Or so I have different setting and context to you, but a big part of that I think is soil health and microbe farming. I'm not trying to grow lettuce, I'm trying to grow soil microbiology.
How are you keeping down the row covers?
I'm using metal pins, landscape pins. 6-inch landscape pins work well for me. I know some people favour sandbags, things like that. That's a hell of a lot of work. I can carry, if I'm wearing work pants with a toggle, I can carry a couple of hundred on my side of my leg. It's very easy to move around. I would need 2,000 sandbags. I'm not up for that. So I use pins, and they work well, but I take care to use the same holes repeatedly. I also have these non-woven geotextile covers that I cover the beds with in winter to sort of tuck the beds to sleep, and that gives me longer soil activity of microbes and earthworms, etc., into the winter and in the spring as well. So, and I use the same pins for that, and I just make sure I use the same holes to make them last as long as possible, because that plastic use is hidden from the public and it's pretty disgusting.
Do you have a permanent and a seasonal workforce?
I have permanent, well, it's seasonal and it's summer only. Like in the winter, the only thing to do is collect eggs and feed larger livestock and go selling produce that's frozen and like eggs and meat. It's very hard. It's not hard. It's easy to get people. It's very hard to get competent people. And I have to train people every year. So that's been exhausting. It's a challenge we all face, I guess. And I'm really in the middle of nowhere, and Swedish people aren't very motivated to do hard farm work.
Local people, East Europeans?
No, never. No, it's always people that specifically wanting to do this kind of thing. It's not just labour. It's people that are passionate about this. I think they've got to have passion because it's hard work. We're moving fast. We're not hanging around. We're working very efficiently. But it's hard to find. And the best people I have, it's a nightmare to try and incentivize them to stay because they're the exact type of people who are going to go and start their own thing. So and I'm training them how to go start their own thing. But that's a bit of a complexity that's unique to me. Like in the context, that's my role in life is empowering young people to get into farming. So I'm happy they go and do that, but it makes my job managing the farm a bit complicated. But I know that's a struggle for everyone to find good people. I mean, I would rather find someone, their mindset, like aptitude and attitude is more important than experience. If they come from conventional farms, they're usually useless to me because they're just totally entrenched in strange ways of doing things. I need people that are super flexible and passionate about ecosystem processes so that they're looking at the right things. Right? We're not technicians. We're ecosystem organizers. You know, modern farming's become just being a technician essentially. That's what ag school teaches. So that mindset doesn't work in this setting. Like, it's highly observational based, and you need passion to make it work. We're not just following protocols. We're dynamically engaged in multiple levels of ecosystem processes. So that's really hard to find. But there's a lot of them around. I mean, there's just not enough farms for everyone still. Yeah. I lost my thread where we were, but we basically, we bought in compost in the beginning because this is the foundation of our production. So I wanted to put money into good compost, and over the time we've grown, we have enough deep litter from our livestock to produce all the compost. So it's a lot of compost in the beginning. You know, I'm putting thick layer of compost, but then I'm not putting much. I'm putting every alternate year less than most market gardeners put in a tillage system. Right?
Sorry, compost.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you mean by compost?
I use a compost that's based on, you won't like this, it's based on peat moss with broiler manure and cow manure. Now, I own a peat swamp, and I'm not against the use of peat in a way that half of you probably want to shoot me if I say that. but there's different layers to this thing. Mass, deep cut German peat fields is not the same as me harvesting my peat swamp that's part of my farm. I'm not against peat. Like, there's nothing wrong with peat. It's incredibly good animal bedding. It's the best animal bedding. That's why people always used it for that. And it does make the best compost. So if you have to get industrial mined, whatever, blah, blah, then that's a different story. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be peat. It could be farmyard manure, like straw with cow manure is the best. And it should be aged enough. It should be 12 to 18 months old. And we use that too. So we use a bit of everything. A lot of people are stuck on municipal compost, and that's fine too, but you need to really look at what's in there. You know, municipal compost is usually cheap, readily available. It's got nutrients, but it's lacking life. So then what I do is make high quality compost on the farm and inoculate that compost to put the life back in. Nutrients easy to get. Life is the hard bit. That's the bit I'm focused on. So you use what you've got, but you have to adapt how you make additions to that to make it really thrive.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
there's something just on the alley here who offer solutions, bioactive solutions. Is that something you would subscribe to?
The question's about bioactive solutions, but I didn't understand what.
Well, for inoculating the manure compost.
Look, I'm a big fan of farmer-ready technologies. I can show you how you do all that for yourself. I've written books about it, made videos about it. You don't need an external company to do that for you. You can do all of that yourself. There's no magical, mystical thing. As long as you understand the basics of what you're doing, you can make every soil amendment you need yourself. Other than mineral-based things, but biological things, you can make all that yourself. So you might want to invest in other people doing it for you for time's sake, but that's part of the joy of farming, is those things, to be a chemist and biologist, and that's the bit that's exciting for me. So I wouldn't like, you can't afford to buy that. You've got all that material lying around you to make it.
How often are you using biostimulants?
So we make compost teas, and we use them with biofertilizers. So the sort of, what I mean by biofertilizers would be like the work developed by Mass Humus, South America, like MPK, homeopathic replacement that's mimicking a cow's gut to some degree, that's making a plant photosynthesize more rapidly and do its own work to feed itself better. That's super low cost, scalable. If you've eaten Tano bananas, you know Tano in Dominican Republic, they do that on an Olympic swimming pool size, and I do it in a blue barrel size. Exactly the same thing. It's like you don't need an external person to do that for you. It's made with manure, rock dust, bread yeast, molasses, milk. It's like anyone can do that at the scale they're working at. And then we use compost tea in relation to that too. And at the point our farm is operating now, there's no benefit to doing that because it is alive, like, you know. So they're restorative tools. And if you're managing for microbes, not lettuces or beef, then at some point you don't need that in your system again. I think time is up. So we better get out of here, I guess.